Hi everybody, welcome to my channel. I am Michelle with Garden Jargon, and I wanted to share with you an update today on the worm farm that I created back in February. Today is March 25th, Thursday. We started the worm bin February 6th, just about 4 days over a month and a half ago. So I've never worm farmed before in my life. I looked on YouTube, I did some research. I figured out a method that I wanted to try for indoor worm farming, and it's worked out quite well. It seemed like it took forever. It's kind of like planting a seed in the garden and waiting for it to germinate, and then waiting for it to grow, and then waiting for it to set fruit, and then letting that fruit ripen. It's like tested my patience, but it actually worked, and I wanted to share with you an update today. So I do have part one of the worm farm set up, and I'll link that below, so you can take a look at that. And then this is about a month and a half after the first setup for the 500 worms that I started. And this is just kind of a follow-up on how that turned out. I wish I could have filmed earlier when I was taking the cardboard off of the top of the worm bin so that you could see. But what I did was I set up the original worm bin with just peat moss. I put water in there to moisten it down to where when I squeezed it to my hand as hard as I could, maybe a drip or two of water would come out. And I mixed that with paper shreds from my shredder. That's what I set up for the first set of the worm farm in these totes. And then I fed them. And I fed them with like my table scraps. I just chopped them up in big chunks, like smaller chunks. Put them underneath I dug a little burrow, put the food in there, and then covered it up to keep the gnats out and the bugs. And then I just started making a slop. Like, I literally would take all the stuff out of my compost bin in my kitchen, run it through my food processor, and it would come out in a smoothie, a worm bin smoothie. So this is all my table scraps that I would throw in my compost. I just ran it through the food processor, made a smoothie. You have to think about worms' mouths are little. Like, it's going to take them a long time to eat through a piece of lettuce or shreds from the carrot. When you peel off carrots, it's going to take them a while to eat that and break that down. Plus, it doesn't have the outside elements of the sun and the rain and the wind and the heat and the cold, breaking that food down also. And then I put them in those baggies, and then I freeze them. So I have these in my deep freezer. I have like 15 bags of this stuff. And so when I know it's getting ready to feed the worms again, I'll pull one out, put it in the fridge, let it thaw out, and then I pour that right into a burrow in the worm bin. So that's how I've been feeding my worms. And it seems to be working. Number one, it keeps the gnats and the bugs down. I haven't had any of those yet. I cover it so it's completely covered with the elements that are inside the worm bin bed. And then the worms go to town. Now, I started off with 500 worms from Uncle Jim's worm farm. They do multiply because now I have big, fat, juicy red worms in there, and then I have little babies in there. But let me go ahead and set you up on the tripod so I can show you what's happening inside the bin today, a month and a half later. Give me 1 second. All right, so here we are. This is the original bin that I started with the worm bin. In here, again, like I said, I mixed it with peat that's just in the bags from the store, as well as paper shreds. And I made it into a consistency that looked like that. So this kind of consistency. So it's about 3 parts peat and about 1 part paper shreds. And I mixed it up, and then I make sure it's got a little bit of moisture in it to where it holds together like a brownie batter, like that. And because the worms need moisture. So this is what the bin looked like in the first week back in February, on February 6th. And this is what the bin looks like after a month and a half. Now, these things that are on top, it's basically brown paper bag. These things were actually in between all of my light bulbs when I bought a package of fluorescent light bulbs for my grow lights. These were the spacers so they don't bang together. And I actually just laid them down on top just like this in this bin when I was done feeding them. So it holds the moisture into the soil that they're actually eating and decomposing. And that's what I used, were these things. So those I can get rid of and put them over here to use them in the new bin. That's all this stuff was. And I wish I could have pulled this off with you guys on the video so you saw what I saw, which was a bunch of worms, like this guy, inside the cardboard. And that kind of confused me a little bit because there's no food up in the cardboard or the paper. However, worms eat cardboard and paper. And what I do realize is that I stopped feeding this bin. Ooh, he's freaking out over there. I stopped feeding this worm bin about 2 weeks ago. I didn't want to give it any more food because I knew it was pretty much completely broken down. Let's see if I can grab these guys. And I wanted to start them in the new worm bin underneath. So what I did was, before I started this bin, I made sure to drill holes underneath it. So there's holes at the bottom of this bin all the way around, about 3 inches apart from each other, and then about 15 holes in the center of the base of this tub right here. Obviously you can see the holes around the perimeter for airflow. I have those that I drilled in there. And then what I did was I built this new bin underneath it, where you can see the imprint from where this bin has been sitting on it. I put the food in this bin. So underneath here is where I put the food. You can see the scraps right here. There's a grape, there's some apple in there, and then I cover it. Well, once they got no more food in this bin, they realized they got to crawl through the holes in the bottom of this bin to get down here to the food source. And that process literally took about 2 weeks because I kept coming down and checking in on this bin and there were still tons of worms. But then 2 weeks later I came in and I'd say 95% of my worms are now in this bin because I crawled through the holes at the bottom of this one to get down to the food source. So what I'm going to do with this bin, since this is pretty much all castings, worm castings, like look at that soil. It smells like dirt from like when you were a little kid playing outside. This whole bin, if I go through this, I'm not going to find a whole lot of worms. And usually when I would do this and scoop my hand in here and pick up a handful of dirt like this, you would find 10 or 15 worms in here. And now there's none. And that's because they've all migrated to the bin that's below this. There's a couple worms, like this little guy. But I'm going to sift through this and make sure I get all the worms out of here and make sure that they're in there. Then I'm going to pour this into a bin labeled worm castings, obviously, and have this ready for the garden when I'm ready to plant outside. So some of the things that I like to layer on top of this is obviously brown paper bag from the grocery store. And then I still have a ton of these. This is just that cardboard, pressed cardboard. You can also use those big, huge egg cartons that sell, you know, those big, huge ones. I think it's like 3 dozen maybe. 18 eggs in one tray. You can lay those on top. But I just lay them on top like this, and then I drench it with water to make sure that the water soaks up. You can also use toilet paper rolls, paper towel rolls, wrapping paper rolls, anything to hold moisture in and to block the light out. One thing I will tell you is this bin is the wrong bin. I don't know why I set this up in this bin, but this bin has no holes around the top, or it doesn't have holes in the bottom. I don't know what I was thinking when I set this up. I think I was just excited and got to going and forgot to put it in a bin with the drilled holes. So after I empty the original worm bin into a nice bucket for my worm castings, I'm going to go ahead and reuse that bin. Pour this stuff into the original bin. So this is pretty much what I have going on in here. This is where my worms are, other than the ones that are still hanging out in the old quarters. But if I dig around in here, I will find nice, plump, juicy red wigglers. They do not like the light at all. Digging down in here, there's more red wigglers. more. See, that's like a baby. So that's one that just, you know, was born a couple weeks ago. Got some big fat ones in there. But this is the new worm farm. So this is going on round 2. And I mean, in this bin, it's probably about a quarter of the way deep. The first bin that I did was actually a little bit lower than this one. So about a fourth of the way up. Let me think. No, I only had it about, I would say my first setup was about 4 inches deep. This second bin, I set it up a lot deeper than that because I wanted the bottom of the other bin to be able to touch this so that the worms could squiggle through and get into this food. So it was a little bit more. But after they eat this and decompress all of this and like decompose this, I mean, it's going to almost double in capacity in size because worm poop is fluffy and airy. And you can totally tell the difference. Probably can't see it on camera, but this is like a light brown and this is a dark black. So it is a lot more rich. These worm castings are going to be a great nutritional supplement for your garden throughout the year. So I'm going to go ahead and fill this back up with the, or I'm actually going to transfer these guys into the original bin after I empty the original bin, and then I'm going to layer it back up and give them a little bit more moisture. So that's it. That's it for the worm farm. I'm sorry the video went a little long and I'm a little overwinded in my speaking, but I've never done a worm farm before and I just wanted to share with you how I did it because it was successful. And I'm not an expert. I've just Googled it and I learned how to do it from watching YouTube videos just like you're doing right now. So I got my worms from Uncle Jim's Worm Farm. They were decently priced. They didn't have 1,000 at the time that I purchased mine. I almost bought 2 sets of 500, but 500 for a tote this size ate through this in 1 month. So over the little month and a half there. So please watch and share my videos. Moving into the future, we're gonna have lots of gardening videos coming up. I'm managing 4 different gardens this year. Lots of vegetables to grow. So it was good to see you. I'm thanking you right now from the bottom of my heart for watching my channel and sharing it because that's how you can support my channel so I can get more content out to you guys in what I do in the gardens. You take care of yourself and I wish you the best in your gardening adventures. Bye-bye.